When it comes to games that had a profound impact on me as a person and changed my perspective about how I see the universe around me, amongst the usual suspects like Celeste, Outer Wilds and Disco Elysium lies that cringy indie game from 2015, Life is Strange.
Ready for the mosh pit, Shaka Bra.
I say cringy in a good way because there is a unique charm that adds to the style and atmosphere of the game.
Must protect my precious so Max never has to chase it down again.
What makes Life is Strange so memorable and impactful for me more than anything is the ending. If you somehow haven't experienced this story yet, I am about to spoil everything and therefore you are hereby warned. I am also about to spoil The Last of Us, Telltale's The Walking Dead and Attack on Titan for the sake of comedy or relevant parallels. Anyway, the ending of Life is Strange might be one of the best instances of the trolley problem I've ever seen in an interactive medium, only this time it is a tornado problem, despite a trolley taking center stage at one point in the game. It is actually a train, but you can understand the similarity. If you are still unfamiliar with the trolley problem even after it was memed to death, the concept represents a moral dilemma where a person is forced to make a decision between saving one or multiple people. In its basic iteration, the dilemma pictures a trolley coming down a track which a person is tied to, and a choice is presented to the subject where they can either pull down a lever to redirect the trolley to another empty track or do nothing. This setup constitutes the foundation of the psychological problem because it doesn't necessarily challenge the subject, as a morally sound person would always choose to pull the lever. By adding more people to said foundation, the trolley problem materializes where the subject is psychologically tested regarding the value of life. This time, the trolley is headed towards the same person that is stuck and the same choice of pulling the lever to change tracks is presented. However, in this instance, there are multiple people tied to the second set of tracks. Now the dilemma becomes interesting because it forces the subject to debate about the morality behind valuing the volume of life rather than life itself. Are 5, 10, 100 people's lives worth more than one? Most people would say yes. However, does the answer change when the other person is a loved one? This is why I love the trolley problem, because it is easily modifiable, it doesn't have a right answer, and it fucks with your morals. And what a better way to do that there is than including interpersonal relationships to the dilemma and shifting a somewhat objective perspective on the situation to a totally subjective outlook. Another mean to create more confusion is to add more nuance to the group of people. Have one of them be a doctor and another one be a serial killer, one of them be a kid and another one be an older person. Suddenly the contrast becomes blurrier and the worth of human life becomes almost undiscernible. Life is Strange takes both of these variations, mixes them together and puts the player in such a difficult position as they are forced to make an impossible choice between saving a town full of people, both innocent and guilty, and the person that you spend the entire game saving and identifying with. I played a lot of games, and when I tell you this is the hardest decisions I have ever made in one, you better believe that the impact of said decision fundamentally changed how I see myself as a person. A decision so divisive that it is the entire reason I decided to make this video. Just look at these stats. When something is 50-50, you know that both sides of the coin have a compelling and well thought argument regarding their choice. This is the empirical evidence a moral dilemma strives to achieve, as it confirms the inexistence of a correct answer, leaving room for discussion and debate. This is why I believe that Life is Strange uses the full potential of the trolley problem and creates such a clear contrast between discrepant opinions. Opinions which I want to explore deeper. I have to disclaim the fact that this is not a review or critique of the game. I know Life is Strange is not a perfect package and how the writing...
I wonder if Chloe thinks about her father when she looks at all these smashed up cars.
The minimalist gameplay...
Bottle.
And the illusion of choice drag the game down, especially the latter, as nothing that you do affects the two endings in a telltale fashion.
Fuck it. Cut it off.
Now don't get me wrong, The Walking Dead is better than any Quantic Dream branching paths 100 endings type game, so that doesn't necessarily hold as valid criticism. Moreover, I don't want to focus on every detail of the story and do a recap, as not everything is relevant to the conclusion. In this video, I want to look at how the game builds up the moral dilemma behind the scenes through the depth of the characters we observe during the story, and try to figure out why so many people have a difficult time choosing between Chloe and Arcadia Bay. Without further ado, in Life is Strange fashion, we have to rewind and start from the beginning, which ironically is the ending. The game doesn't waste time when it comes to introductions, as we are immediately presented with a tornado, which represents the constant threat of the story and the main source of tension, as well as Max, the protagonist and the lens through which we are going to observe the universe around us. In order to create a personal perspective for the trolley problem to be psychologically challenging, apart from building up the stakes through the creation of meaningful connections and understandings, it is important to immerse the player in the perspective of the main character. That being said, although Max is not a blank slate, having already established relationships with various characters in the story, especially Chloe, the game manages to make the player empathize and connect with her through her key personality traits as well as the setting of the story. Max returns to her hometown after being away for 5 years in order to pursue her dream education. Having Max reintegrate herself in a familiar yet distant setting, the game flawlessly creates a way to immerse the player in a foreign context, as well as establishing the fact that Max has history with the environment she's in. Moreover, her personality being shy, calm and collected, taking the role of an observer when it comes to social interactions, is very relatable and pushes the player into forming their own personal opinions regarding the characters already present in Max's life. That, and because it is a video game and you play as her, obviously. What I love about the game's introduction is that it gets straight to the point for new players, and it subtly foreshadows everything for returning players. The bathroom incident might seem like an over-the-top scenario that would justify Max getting time-traveling superpowers. However, it represents the catalyst that sets in stone the theme and trajectory of the entire story. This is the conclusion disguised as the introduction. That's some Attack on Titan shit right there. Later on, the game starts developing the narrative as a mystery regarding the disappearance of Rachel Amber and the strange things happening at Blackwell, so the player is justified thinking the superpowers are just a mechanic to add some spice to the gameplay and the choice system. However, the time aspect was the main focus all along, and you start figuring it out as the ending draws near. Moreover, what is introduced and foreshadowed in the opening are the two components that make up our trolley problem, Chloe and Arcadia Bay. Besides Max, these two are the main characters that Life is Strange focuses on, allowing the player to uncover their many layers, building up the moral dilemma in the background by adding more context. In order to highlight the importance of these two elements regarding the bigger picture, Chloe and Arcadia Bay also symbolize the past, present and future, adding to the time motif. Max being estranged from her best friend and the home she left behind adds to the immersion of the player at the beginning of the story through unfamiliarity, highlighting the past aspect. The present consists of Max's return and how she tries to integrate herself at her dream university in this new life chapter, as well as reconnecting with her abandoned best friend. And the future is portrayed by Max's passion of photography getting curated by her favorite teacher, leading into a possible future career, as well as the life and relationship she starts rebuilding with Chloe. These two worlds get separate foundations as they are pretty isolated in the first two episodes, allowing each other to develop their own identity and importance to Max, and as the story moves forward, they start blending into each other with proper development and adequate focus. And by the end, when these worlds collide, the moral dilemma is so well put together that the player is left with no easy and pleasurable choice to make. To figure out how we got here again, we'll have to rewind once more and explore both worlds individually and see how the game builds up their relationship with the player. Arcadia Bay is the first quote-unquote character that we're introduced to in the halls of Blackwell. I keep referring to Arcadia Bay as a character as I view the entire town as a single entity made up by every soul that lives there other than Chloe, having its own personality and background. The history of the town as well as every character, minor or major, adds more nuance to the bigger picture when it comes to choosing who should you sacrifice. Although we later get to see the Bay through the lens of the townies such as Joyce, Frank and the other regulars at the Two Whales, Arcadia Bay is mostly represented by the students at Blackwell due to the fact that we get to experience the story through Max, and that is her environment. Despite the discrepancy regarding the focus on the people living in Arcadia Bay, the moral dilemma at the end is made more difficult through the deep characterization of said students that were introduced to at the start of the game. At Blackwell, you get the generic stereotypes, the jocks, the nerds, the mean girls, the hipsters, the quiet ones, and so on. You have seen these archetypes before, however the game understands that, and in order to make the player care, it adds layers to these characters which you can discover by interacting with the side content. Life is Strange is not the most gameplay focused game you'll ever play, to say the least, as it bets all its chips on its story and characters, and the smart thing it does to redirect the player from bum rushing through the main story and ignoring the side content is rewarding you with context that adds to the moral dilemma. The conversations you have with the multitude of side characters enriches Arcadia Bay with nuance and creates an interesting debate, as conflicting information may create a different perspective regarding the bigger picture. We see this aspect when we find out from the fisherman and the trucker that Arcadia Bay is not a desirable location when it comes to living conditions, and it is on the verge of a collapse. The downturn of the fishing industry results in a declining economy when talking about a town where the ocean is its biggest asset. Sprinkle some corruption and gentrification coming from the Prescott family, and you can build an argument of how Arcadia Bay was doomed way before there was a threat of a gigantic tornado. But is it justifiable to condemn the whole town to such a tragic fate only because of its declining state of living conditions? The answer is yes, if we're talking about Paris. These characters with extra shit to say are not just thrown to the side in order to fill up empty space and waste the player's time. The meaningful insight inside the lives of the people you interact with would be considered filler in a regular game, but the tornado problem contextualizes these optional segments as crucial information that might influence your decision at the end. These small characters add depth to Arcadia Bay as an entity, and if you interact with them, you will have to consider them too when making the final choice. Some examples are Brooke and her crush on Warren, Taylor and her relationship with her mom, or the homeless lady and her over-theorized sad state. She is not Max from the future or other dimensions, leave her alone. The moral dilemma expands further than just a numbers game regarding the amount of people you save when you discover the strength and flaws of the people you're saving. The keyword that perfectly encapsulates the population of Arcadia Bay is grey, as most of them are depicted as either morally good or bad persons with twists that balances them in the opposite direction. These characters are humanized through their flaws, but they're also left prone to judgment when you decide if they deserve to be hit by the tornado. I want to illustrate this point using adequate examples that I placed in what I call the chart of grayness. On the most part, I can classify the inhabitants of Arcadia Bay in one of these three gradients of grey. Light grey, meaning that the person appears as morally good, but they have a red flag or two. Dark grey, meaning that the person is portrayed as morally bad, but they have a bright side. And pure grey is for the characters that cling to both sides of the spectrum kinda equally. One of these people is David. David is the stepfather of Chloe and the security chief at Blackwell, representing somewhat of a bridge between these two worlds. On one hand, David's obsession for surveillance is totally undefendable, as his intrusive actions have no limits. His behavior towards Kate is unacceptable, and him getting detailed records and photos of both Max and Kate is too much. On the other hand, when you take into account how much he cares for his family and tries to protect it, you unlock a new perspective of him. If you tell David that Chloe is dead, you can see the amount of pain he's in, as he really cares about Chloe.
No, God. Not Chloe.
David, wait!
He holds her into such a high regard that he blames her friends Max and Rachel for being bad influences rather than the other way around. David is the complete grey package of a loving husband that tries to get accepted by his adoptive daughter and will go to any creepy and intrusive extent to protect his family. On the bright side of the spectrum, you have faces such as Warren, who is the poster child of a quote-unquote nice guy. He's an awkward, innocent nerd that tries to do good and stay out of trouble. However, his behavior towards Max is kinda sus, to the point that in her nightmare frame of mind, even she considers him as a threat, imagining a possible shrine of her that Warren has in his locker, which is not far from the truth, as Warren does keep a photo of them in his locker. Besides the insistent texting, the cherry on top of his creepy behavior is how he peeps around the corner to spy on Max. So despite the good guy appearance, Warren for sure gives off stalker vibes. On the dark side of the chart, we obviously have Victoria. From the preppy appearance to the sassy behavior, Victoria checks all the boxes for your typical mean girl. At first, she's an unlikable, shady bitch that creates needless drama and bullies Kate so much she's driven to suicide. The oversharing of Kate's viral video is absolutely cruel and inexcusable. However, behind all this mean-spirited package hides an insecure girl that projects her insecurities on other people as she's not comfortable with herself. You can easily empathize with this type of vulnerability, especially after you see how much she regrets and tries to amend what she did to Kate, so Victoria might not be as bad as she seems. Referring to the chart of greatness, I consciously omitted the extremities that define the limits of the chart: Kate and Nathan. I didn't include them at first because they are total opposites in the bigger picture, both personality-wise, and also their input on the tornado problem is either non-existing or game-changing, highlighting their significance to the story. Starting from the final circle of hell, Nathan is a total unredeemable sack of shit. He straight up helps Mr. Jefferson drug, kidnap, and photograph unsuspecting girls such as Kate and Rachel, who he actually murders. Accidentally, but on all accounts, that is technically still murder. The only thing that keeps Nathan the darkest of grays and not straight up black like Mr. Jefferson is the fact that he's just a mentally ill kid with substance abuse issues that was abused by his father his entire life and manipulated by Mr. Jefferson to do said evil stuff. I can easily compare him with Josh from Until Dawn, as both of them are mentally unwell and through neglection and abuse they manage to do horrible things. You can empathize and feel sorry for Nathan as a victim, but he is much more of an abuser than a victim if you ask me. Despite his importance to the story, Nathan doesn't have an impact on the tornado problem, as he is already dead if you choose to save Chloe, or he gets arrested otherwise, leaving the player to basically decide which bad fate is worse for him, death or prison. Having mentioned her so much, now we have finally arrived at the good counterpart of Nathan, Kate. I love everything revolving around Kate. I love the fact that her section is the only time in the game where you can't use your power, raising the tension to the max, no pun intended, as she can actually die. Kate is such a pure character with almost no flaws, and you cannot help but feel sorry for her and want the best for her, to the point that the final decision changes to sacrifice Kate or sacrifice Chloe to an extent. Fuck it, there is also Alyssa to consider, as you have to save her dumbass every fucking episode, so the choice might as well be sacrifice Alyssa or sacrifice Chloe. I say almost no flaws, as it is stated that Kate was the girl preaching about the importance of abstinence due to her religious background. Whilst I don't see Kate as a raging pro-lifer, I can imagine her being somewhat overbearing preaching this type of message, but considering how she was raised and how good of a person she is in general, I kinda had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to find something that's not really white about her to put her on the chart. These are the major aspects that define Arcadia Bay as an entity, but I can go on and on about the small details that add so much character, such as the endless graffiti that confirms how horrible people can be, or the large animal population in the area that is going to be killed as well by the tornado. Except Rachel, who vanishes after becoming a deer. At the end of the day, Arcadia Bay is more than your regular coastal retreat, filled with as much desperation as hope, being defined by its many troubled people that have their own dreams and aspirations. That being said, it's hard to believe how one single person can mean more than an entire population of a town to so many people. Chloe is the character that is at the center of everything that happens in the story of Life is Strange. She is the reason why Max gets her powers in the first place and the reason for the tornado problem. The smart thing that the game does in order to hide this catalyst from a new player is how Max doesn't recognize Chloe at first in the bathroom. We are expected to think that she's just a regular student at Blackwell, and despite the gravity of the situation, we're led to believe this was just an isolated incident. Little did we know that this was actually a canon event. We officially meet Chloe only after we get familiar with the students at Blackwell, as these worlds get their own proper space in the beginning in order to contrast their importance to Max. Chloe is a glimpse in Max's past life, whilst Blackwell represents her present life, and we're immersed into having the same perception through the pacing of the game. We get accustomed to Max's environment and power as the status quo is established, only for Chloe to drop in unexpectedly. We're surprised by the fact that Max recognizes Chloe after not doing it in the bathroom. One little detail I love in the first episode is the fact that Chloe in Max's picture doesn't resemble present Chloe like in the other photos, leading the player on until the big reveal. And like that, we're thrown into the real exposition of the game, where we learn that Chloe was in fact Max's best friend that she left behind alongside Arcadia Bay. Another neat trick that the game does to give Chloe her proper introduction and screen time for the player to bond with her is through how episode 1 is structured in two halves, focusing the attention on Arcadia Bay and Chloe respectively, saving Chloe for the second half because recency bias. Episode 2 kinda does the same thing by having Chloe and Blackwell separated into different segments and creating a choice based on these two worlds clashing into each other. This spacing highlights how the initial merging of the worlds leads to everything going to shit and the inevitable final choice. The pacing also builds up the relationship between Chloe and Max as a snowball, starting from a broken friendship and culminating into an indestructible bond, unless you decide to destroy it. Chloe's character can be pretty much summed up as her being a lost soul. She is a loser, not in the sense that she is lame, but in the sense that she has lost almost everything meaningful to her. She has lost her dad in a tragic car accident, her best friend abandoned her, and her soulmate disappeared without a trace, only to be found later as a dead body buried in a junkyard. Having known so much loss, Chloe is left in a depressive state as she tries everything that may fill her empty soul, from drastic makeovers to drugs and meaningless flings. She rebels against her mom that was able to move on from her husband's death because she couldn't. She hates her stepfather because the place of her father figure cannot be retaken in her eyes. In her eyes, the blame for everything bad she went through is placed on her father dying on her, because the pain is so severe that it is easier to hold a dead man responsible rather than facing your own trauma. Not long after that, her best friend leaves her to move to another town, cutting all forms of contact. It must suck losing a parent, but being left alone to process this loss by the person who was supposed to be there for you can only make you feel alienated from the world, and that's why she rejects Joyce. Chloe feels that Joyce cannot make up for the losses she suffered despite her trying her best to raise Chloe, and after David enters their life, she feels betrayed by her mother for replacing her father. Unironically, Chloe is stuck in time as that innocent 13-year-old unable to process her trauma until until Rachel comes along. An important side note I have to make is that I will not refer to Before the Storm, as that is extra content meant to be experienced after the main game and the final choice, therefore it wouldn't be fair. Chloe's relationship with Rachel is already built up in the main game enough for it to be relevant to the tornado problem. Before the Storm just materializes said relationship in a beautiful story made tragic by the ending that we know is coming, increasing the replayability value of the main game after experiencing Chloe's full backstory. That being said, Rachel was Chloe's saving grace from the pit she was in, and as soon as their relationship starts to blossom, Rachel is stolen from her. You know what's worse than losing someone in an accident or losing someone to distance? Is losing someone to the world not knowing what happened to them. Chloe had to go through every possible scenario in her head of what could have happened to Rachel. Obsession that would turn into a deep depression. Chloe found herself screaming in the hotel room. My bad. Rachel was planning to leave for Los Angeles, but she wasn't planning to leave Chloe, so in desperation, Chloe prints a worrying amount of missing person posters, leading herself on the same path of self-destruction she's used to, getting expelled from Blackwell and sabotaging every good thing in her life. It seems that Chloe can't catch a break from life, so she digs her hole even more through death and bad decisions with the hope of leaving Arcadia Bay alongside all her problems. That is when she dies.
Get that gun away from me, psycho!
Chloe gets killed in a dark and cold bathroom by her abuser, knowing that everyone she's ever loved abandoned her. Everything that Chloe has ever wanted was someone to be there for her, and yet the only person that's beside her as she dies is her murderer. Chloe was finally ready to move past her trauma and put everything behind her, and in this process she gets killed in a tragic accident just like her father, and by the same person that also killed Rachel. Talk about poetic. Also poetic is the fact that she would never know that her best friend that abandoned her watched her die. Or would she? See, what I described is the normal timeline that was supposed to happen. However, Max disrupts this timeline when she magically rewinds time in order to save Chloe, setting the tornado problem in motion. In this new timeline, not only did we see Chloe alive, but we see her redemption arc. Max saved Chloe's life twice, once in that bathroom and the second time during the rest of the game by giving it a meaning again. As I mentioned before, the relationship starts rebuilding slow, and like a snowball, it keeps becoming much quicker. Chloe utilizes this second chance at life to the fullest, and instead of moving forward with her plan of leaving Arcadia Bay, she starts helping Max explore her power, reminiscing about the old days and living like kids again, picking up from where they left off. We see Chloe actually starting to enjoy life as her purpose shifts into figuring out the mysterious events happening at Blackwell, hoping they may be connected to Rachel and her disappearance. As the search continues, we start to see the parallels between Max and Rachel as Chloe regains the feeling of having that special person in her life. It becomes even more obvious when Max takes Rachel's clothes. However, this is not to say that Max also takes a role in Chloe's life. I believe this to be a way the game shows how Max is retaking her own place in Chloe's life, as Rachel was there for Chloe when she was not, and now she can be that person again. With Max back in her life, you see Chloe dancing in the same room she once wrote these depressing ass messages. For real, I love the attention to detail like this, as it makes me empathize with Chloe even more. Imagine hating your life so much that you draw a portal to another universe hoping you can escape from your problems, which are so overbearing that you don't stop at one. This is most likely a case for reusing assets, but I want to believe that Chloe drew all these holes all over town as her depression got worse. So going from picturing Chloe in that state to seeing her in this one, it can only make you happy. As the player, you start feeling for this lost girl finding herself as the pieces of her life seem to be getting put back together. Through the lens of Max, you experience the developing of their relationship in real time, and as Max gets closer and closer with Chloe, you do the same thing. With each episode, you're getting more eager to see them finally getting at the bottom of the mystery, as well as finally getting together. But as soon as we actually get there, everything changes again for the worse. You get your one happy moment when they kiss. And don't tell me you didn't make them kiss. Look at these stats. This is the easiest decision in any game. And after that, everything goes to shit when they find Rachel dead. On one hand, this is truly tragic as Chloe clung to the thinnest fabric of hope that Rachel might be alive, only to see her in such a deplorable state, being left alongside literal trash. On the other hand, she can finally move on from Rachel as she discovers her fate. Chloe was already affected when she learned about Frank and Rachel's relationship, feeling as she was betrayed again by a person she loves, and when she found her body, she fully regressed into her destructive behavior. We see her blindsided by revenge as her only goal becomes taking justice into her own hands and kill Nathan, and as she follows this path of destruction, she gets killed again by Mark Jefferson. Chloe is a complex character. She's lost so much and has been through a lot of suffering. Suffering which made her project her pain on people that don't deserve it. She chose to reject rather than embrace, dragging others to her level. Chloe is not a bad person at her core. However, hurt people, and we see her desperation pushes her to do questionable things, such as wanting to steal money from the handicap fund, or how much she rebels against Joyce when they both share the same trauma and Joyce has sacrificed a lot to raise Chloe. Despite hyping up Chloe, she's still a flawed human that has caused a lot of pain to the people closest to her, and the game knows to show us all sides of her through Max. Max is the glue that keeps Chloe together, literally, and represents her chance at redemption, and we see this as we follow them throughout the game, saving her life time and time again. Although I think this is how the game shows us how the universe is trying to correct the timeline by killing Chloe, I also think it's symbolic for how Chloe was always destined to this fate due to the path she was following. And through the same frame of mind, I also believe that Max saving her life represents a crossroads in said path and a way out for Chloe. I don't think it's a solid argument that the universe will continue trying to kill Chloe after the tornado, as it is heavily implied that Max stands for that chance at her new life that Chloe desperately searches for, appearing at the most crucial point in her life. The only catch being is that this new beginning comes at a heavy price. No pun intended. We have finally arrived at the lighthouse and the final choice. If I had a nickel for every time a lighthouse is featured at the center of something fucked up, I would have more than 2 nickels. I would probably have enough money for a McDonald's meal at least. I have tried to portray at the best of my ability why I think the game builds up the difficulty of this moral dilemma that takes the form of the trolley problem, as both of these choices don't seem right and leave room for debate. And apparently almost everyone feels the same way considering these statistics 10 years after the game's original launch. On one hand, you literally doom an entire town filled with mostly innocent people, with an emphasis on a promising young student population that have a bright future in front of them, in spite of their shady or horrible personalities. One thing that I don't think is debatable regarding this outcome, however, is the rate of survival for the people in Arcadia Bay. We literally see some of them die and your input leads to them living or not. That is how the game suggests that you should not think about the chances of survivability in this type of situation. It's a big ass tornado. If it hits this decrepit small town, the people are going to die. Okay, small spoiler for Life is Strange 2, 3, 2, 1. I don't care if David survives if you choose to sacrifice Arcadia Bay. That doesn't mean you should think about other people probably getting out alive too. The same way I don't believe you should think about the rate of success for Ellie's operation in The Last of Us. It's like a get out of jail free card for people that don't want to be psychologically challenged. That's not the point of the story and it doesn't serve the message with anything. That being said, in the case that you indeed save the people of Arcadia Bay, you let a broken young girl succumb to the darkness that has become her life. One important side note is that despite Chloe giving you the okay of letting her go as she understands the bigger picture and is appreciative for the last days she spent with you, you're not sacrificing this Chloe. You're sacrificing a lonely Chloe that never got to reunite with Max, that never got to find out what happened to Rachel, that didn't get to reconnect with her younger self and remember the joy of life. You're letting a mom lose her only daughter after already burying a husband. You're engraving into David's head that he could not keep his promise to Joyce and protect his stepdaughter. You're robbing Chloe of a happy life that she never got after all the misery she's been through. You're robbing Chloe of the love she felt for Max and the love she received back. If you feel like I'm not being very objective right now when presenting these two options, it's because I'm not. This is the point of the trolley problem, to discover yourself as a person and the emotional choices you would make in a difficult situation. That's why I said the game fundamentally changed how I see myself as a person, because before Life is Strange, I always depicted myself as a selfless person, relating to heroes that would always choose the good of many above their own, because it was the right thing to do. In a post-Life is Strange world, I'm a piece of shit that chose a blue-haired girl over a whole fucking town full of people. With this video, I didn't want to build a case about why I believe choosing Chloe is either the right or the wrong choice, but I had to put my subjective opinion out there to contrast the other valid arguments in favor of saving the town, and also validate people like me that felt emotionally connected to this character that couldn't bear to quote-unquote lose her after everything you've been through. I mean, I'm not killing the bitch after she gets shot 3 times. Which is also neatly foreshadowed by her necklace that has 3 bullets. And after I already killed her in an alternate timeline. At this point, fuck Kate, I'm sorry. Some people believe that the point of the game is to let go, and that's why the choice to let go of Chloe makes thematically the most sense, and that's a total valid perspective. For me, the point of Life is Strange is how one person can make you want to rebel against the universe, rewriting the fate prescribed for you in spite of the severe consequences. The selfish impulse of finding that special connection and protecting it against any moral judgment just does something to me, because I feel so bad letting all these people die. But at the same time, the pain I would feel if I sacrificed Chloe would be much worse. At the end of the day, this is why Life is Strange is special to me and so many other people. Besides the cozy aesthetic and the beautiful soundtrack, the game is unforgettable because it creates a community that will endlessly discuss and debate the final choice of the game, where everyone is trying to justify their totally not emotional decision in a definitely not subjective manner to create an unquestionably unbiased argument that solidifies their opinion as the quote-unquote right one that fits the game's theme the best way. This is what makes a great moral dilemma, and that's why Life is Strange, in my opinion, creates the best trolley problem I have ever seen in a video game.